Daniel, let's move on to talk a bit about the Middle East. It's an area, particularly Jerusalem, that seems to be, Jerusalem seems to be the sticking point in all the negotiations. Who actually has that claim? Who has a legitimate claim on Jerusalem as a place?
Let me preface my answer by saying that I think that the so-called refugee problem is even deeper and danker and more difficult than Jerusalem. That's it, Jerusalem. Well, what one has are contending claims to Jerusalem. And there are, in theory, three: Jewish, Christian, and Muslim. Indeed, back in the late 40s, there was still a Christian claim, and thus the internationalization of Jerusalem. But that Christian claim is now, I think, essentially defunct. And what are left are Jewish and Muslim claims. And as I see it, the Jewish claim is quite strong, in that the Bible many times refers to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is central in Jewish religious practice. In Islam, however, the Quran never mentions it, not once. There is one reference which is often taken to mean Jerusalem, but it's not a reference to Jerusalem. I indeed have offered a prize of $1 million for anyone who can find mention of Jerusalem in the Quran. That was several years ago. I've had no takers in. It's not there. It's not part of the religion. It historically, this is where it gets interesting, it historically has been central for Muslims at certain points when it has been politically or religiously of interest. Let me give you an example. In the mandatory period, when the British ruled Jerusalem and Palestine from 1918 to 1948, 30-year period, Jerusalem became central to the Palestinian message. And then the Jordanians took control of at least the important parts of Jerusalem between 1948 and 1967, and it fell off the table. It was no longer of interest. And indeed, the Jordanians treated Jerusalem in a rather disparaging way. All the central ministries and money, and even the Friday sermon were broadcast from Amman, the capital of Jerusalem. And then the Jordanians lost Jerusalem in 1967, and once again, Jerusalem became of paramount importance to Palestinians and other Muslims. Well, that's not quite the same. That's not really a solid claim to Jerusalem. The real Jerusalem in Islam is Mecca. What Jerusalem is for Judaism, Mecca is for Islam. And Mecca is the heart of the religion. Jerusalem is not terribly important.
So, what chance is there then for the peace process if the goalposts are moving all the time?
I don't think there is a chance for diplomacy, because there's a war underway. And I don't believe it makes intuitive sense or strategic sense to have negotiations while the war is underway. It's got to be won and lost first, and then you have negotiations. I don't think negotiations have succeeded, whether it be with Israel and the Palestinians or Israel and Egypt. Yeah, there's a peace treaty, but if you look in Egypt at opinion polls, the vast majority, 92% or so, of Egyptians say that they see Israel as an enemy. 2 or 3% see it as a friendly country. Well, the war is not over just because the president signed a treaty back in 1979. I think it's delusional to think that pieces of paper can end the conflict. What will end the conflict is a change of heart among the enemies of Israel who come to accept it and say, okay, we're not happy it's there, but it's there, it's a fact, it's reality, we accept it, let's move on to another issue. So that's when the conflict is over. So
what are the chances of that happening?
That is certainly possible, but it requires Western governments to focus on getting Palestinians in particular, and Arabs and Muslims more broadly, to accept the permanent existence of a Jewish state. And it's not hopeless. There are about 1/5 of the Palestinians who do accept Israel already. It's my premise that should the Palestinians give up in their battle to eliminate Israel, then other Arabs and Muslims will eventually follow. If the Palestinians are not trying to eliminate Israel, then why should Egyptians, Iranians, and Malaysians be trying to do that? So I think the key is getting the Palestinians to give up this aspiration to eliminate Israel, and then other things will follow. But that'll take time, no question. And the Iranian nuclear buildup is of extreme importance and danger.
You've been tagged as being anti-Islam, but I saw something that you'd written where you said actually you've held the same position and everybody else has, you are now moderate because everyone else has come past you. Would you describe yourself as anti-Islam?
No, I've always said
I mean,
I'm neutral. I'm neutral. I mean, nobody asked me about Buddhism or Judaism or Christianity, but if they did, I'd say I'm neutral. I don't have opinions on religions. It's not my business. I'm a foreign policy analyst. I do have opinions on political ideologies. I loathe and despise fascism, communism, and Islamism. This form of Islam that has transformed Islam into a radical utopian ideology I see as deeply threatening, and indeed many Muslims do. And indeed the main body of victims of Islamism has been Muslims. The worst humanitarian crisis in the world today is, in terms of conflicts, is in Sudan, where it's Muslim versus Muslim. It's Islamist versus non-Islamist. And in Algeria in the 1990s, there were 100 or more thousand deaths in the course of an Islamist insurrection. So Muslims are not all Islamists, and many of them loathe and despise it as well. So I see it more in the context of civilization versus barbarism, as it was with the fascists and the communists, and now with the Islamists. And the good news is there are plenty of Muslims who agree with that. Now, they're not organized, they're not funded, they're not present in the same way as the Islamists are. But I think that's what, you started by asking me what should American foreign policy be. I think it should be in large part devoted to building up an anti-Islamist Muslim movement. That is of crucial importance, because we who are not Muslim cannot solve this. That's the only way in which this threat can end, is by having Muslims see that there's an alternative. Right now, Muslims, especially young ones, see Islamism. That's what's available. Whether they look at television or internet or go to mosques or read newspapers, books, it's the Islamist message that dominates. And that is our problem.
It's been fascinating to talk to you, Daniel. Thank you very much indeed.